Dieser Podcast hat nur ein Ziel: smarte Geschäftsideen und wie du sie erfolgreich machst. Und in dieser Folge lernst du von der Hype-Getränkemarke aus den USA. 2020 hat sie noch 10 Millionen Dollar natürlich Umsatz gemacht, 3 Jahre später das 30-fache, also eine Viertelmilliarde. Diese Marke ist gerade auf dem Weg in den Orbit, hat eine völlig einzigartige Stimme in Social Media und ist in Deutschland noch total unbekannt. Das ändert sich heute für dich, denn wir reden mit Andy Pearson, der Creative Director für Liquid Death. Wie geht Marketing im 21. Jahrhundert? Wie können du und ich 10-mal kreativer werden mit dem Prozess von Liquid Death? Und was hat so ein Kerl wie Andy für Geschäftsideen? Schnall dich an, das ist eine fantastische Folge mit einem Mann, der wirklich alle kreativen Regeln bricht. Ganz kurz in eigener Sache, von Konzeption bis Ausstrahlung hat das Team von Digital Optimisten 10 Stunden an dieser Folge gearbeitet. Dich kostet es nur 10 Sekunden, uns ein Rating auf Apple Podcasts oder Spotify zu geben. Eine kleine Sache, die uns aber enorm hilft. Ich bin Alex von Digital Optimisten und jetzt rein ins Gespräch mit Andy Pearson, VP of Creative bei Liquid Death. Andy, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Andy, I think you might be the most creative guy I've ever had on this show. We'll see in the course of this interview.
Yeah, okay.
But I heard a story about you. It involves a small town in southern France, an award, and cookies. And I'd love to hear that story.
Okay. Well, so after college, I went to an advertising kind of art school called the Creative Circus in Atlanta, Georgia. And as I was there, we applied to a student portion of this big international award show. So there's this, it's really the largest advertising show in the advertising and marketing industry. It's called the Cannes Festival of Creativity. And it takes place in Cannes every year, about a month after the film. So the film show. So it's like all the real big names do the film thing, and then the advertising people come in like a month later, and you know, party around their awards. And so we had applied for this. There's a student award, and my partner and I, who happens to actually now be my wife, applied for this award. We sent in this idea. And didn't hear back. And then out of the blue, we got this email from the organizers that said, "Hey, congrats, you guys won. The award's called a Future Lion. You won the Future Lion. We're just wondering if you're going to come here next week to pick it up in person." And so we frantically Google, like, where is Cannes? And we're like, oh no, it's in France. And, you know, and we were poor students. We had no money at all. And so it turns out we had won one of the awards, and then another team at our school has also won an award. So 2 awards. They only give out 5 in the world every year to students that are kind of like going to be the future of advertising, is kind of the idea. And we just said, how are we ever going to get the money to go? We did all the calculations. The flights alone for the 4 of us were going to be $6,000 US. Mm-hmm. You know, to spend a week in Cannes, all of us together, was another $4,000 US. So we need $10,000 total. And so we're like, well, we'll do fundraisers. Maybe we'll do a car wash. And
that's what people do to get some money, right?
Yeah, we were like, and then I was like, yeah, I mean, $100 maybe, or we'll throw a party, a kegger, and try to raise money that way. I was like, how do they do it in movies? And and then finally, I was like, well, what if we just had a bake sale for, like, you know, we sold cookies, and we just sell cookies for $500 a piece. And then, you know, we only need to sell 20 cookies, because, you know, 500 times 20 is $10,000. And so we're like, that seems like a reasonable idea. So overnight, we quickly threw up a website. And this was, I'm dating myself, but it was when it was harder to make a website online. And so, you know, we did this photo shoot. We had this, we made this website, Cookies for Cannes, and we're like $500 a piece. and sprinkles were $100 extra, I think. And
it's a value add strategy.
Yeah, it's like micropayments, and so we threw it online and blasted out to all like the advertising and marketing websites and blogs and even agencies, and heard nothing. And we were like, oh no, we failed. And then, a couple hours later, the next morning, we got a call from an advertising agency, Leo Burnett in Chicago, and they said, "Hey, we'd love to buy a dozen cookies." Wow. And we were just
that's
floored.
$6,000, right? That's
yes.
You're over halfway there.
$6,000 just out of thin air, and then we had a couple other people that contacted us that next day and wanted to buy a cookie or part of a cookie. And we ended up raising all $10,000 within 24 hours.
Wow. By selling cookies,
and it was
for 500
selling
bucks
cookies
a piece. Not bad.
And it was the first time, we were in ads, we were students and we were making fake ads in this ad school, right? That's kind of as you're learning how to be creative, you're learning how to generate ideas, and it's all theoretical. And this was the first time we had made something, and I kind of stopped for a second. I was like, wow, this is my first ad that's worked. This idea that wasn't even an ad, that was this other kind of bizarre, just of a thought, this kind of insane thought. It actually worked, and it gripped people, and they gave me money for it. This is wild. And so I kind of have always, I think that was kind of the beginning when I really realized the power of these really seemingly nonsensical ideas that actually spark joy in people. And it's an idea that by the pure fact the idea exists, it gives somebody a piece of entertainment or it gives them a little bit of joy. And so I think that's kind of been something that I've carried throughout my career. Was it really started with selling cookies for $10,000 and going to Cannes.
What a great origin story that you have there. So I guess now you are, I think, one of the most creative minds in the industry. Well, I could say for a brand that I find fascinating, almost beyond belief. And first off, let's talk about the brand. It's called Liquid Death. Not many people in Germany know the brand, or in German-speaking countries, but that is pretty different in the States. So let's talk about Liquid Death. And you sell a product that has a flaming skull on the front. Your claim is murder your thirst. And your flavors are called Mango Chainsaw, Dead Billionaire, and Rest in Peach. What the heck are you selling?
We are selling healthy beverages. We started with water. Now we have a whole line of flavored sparkling waters, iced tea. In fact, just yesterday, we launched a line of electrolyte death mix that you can mix into your cans of Liquid Death. But yeah, at our core, we're just a healthy beverage company. Our whole goal is to make health and sustainability 50 times more fun. So if you Google Liquid Death, it'll pop up. You'll see basically what it looks like is a tall boy, a big aluminum can of beer, but what's inside is really just water, right? And so the whole idea is since the dawn of time, beer and energy drinks and candy companies and all the things that aren't really good for us are the ones that are always marketed as the most fun, right? So, if you watch any beer commercial, they're having more fun than anybody else. The beer brands, they're always really funny. Here in the US for the Super Bowl, everyone looks forward to the beer commercials because they're going to be the funniest ones on the Super Bowl, right? But these brands aren't really that great for us. And so the idea was, could we take all that energy, all that entertainment that goes into making these brands and direct that towards something that's literally the healthiest thing on the planet, which is water, right? It doesn't get more basic than that. Can we make water cool? And can we make healthy beverages cool? And so the idea is really to outflank these other categories and make water cool for the very first time. And then on top of that, you know, if you look at the water industry, especially in the US, I know more so in Germany, you have a lot of spring water and tends to be in glass bottles as well, but particularly in the US, basically all water is bottled in single-use plastic. So there's so much waste that's generated by this industry. I mean, really, at its core, when you're buying bottled water, especially here, you're buying a plastic bottle. It happens to contain water, but you're buying the portability of a plastic bottle, right? And so if you look at how big that industry is, there's an insane amount of waste from plastic bottles that ends up in landfills and ends up in oceans and ends up in our bodies eventually down the line, right? And so simply by putting it in aluminum cans, those are infinitely recyclable. We were able to reuse aluminum over and over and over again. And so we're trying to take some of those single-use plastics out of the system as well.
Got it. So it's kind of punk rock mixed with an environmental message as well.
Yeah.
And I think that combination seems to be dynamite. In 2020, I found a couple of figures online, and I know you don't publish them, so I know that you might not be commenting on that. But in 2020, you had 10 million in sales, and 2023, at least that's what you read online, at maybe north of 250 million. And my question to you is, how much of that success do you think can be attributed to marketing?
I think it is attributed to a vision for what we're doing, right? Which entails marketing, which entails operations, which entails salespeople. I think when you look at, as you said, Liquid Death is the most counterintuitive name to name a healthy water product or a healthy beverage company, right? And so from the very core, from the very beginning of the idea of Liquid Death, that's where you have this fascinating concept that people can't look away from and people can't ignore. And then of course we have, you know, an amazing people behind the scenes that are doing all the things to break into the beverage industries. I mean, the rate of failure is so dramatically high for anyone trying to break into the industry. So you have to have the people that really know what they're doing behind it. And so we've been lucky to have that side of things as well. But to go back, I think, you know, we were founded by someone who is an advertising creative himself, Mike Cesario, who I actually met on my first day or first week on the job that I got after that cookies for can thing. It's kind of a wild story. After I landed that job, I went to this other big agency after I landed that award, I went to this big agency in Portland, got offered a job and then laid off the very next day. And then ended up through that process, ended up at Crispin Porter Bogusky, which was at the time, we were named Agency of the Decade back in 2010. Probably the best agency in the world, or certainly one of them. And Mike was there as well. And so I think we understood the power of big ideas and the power of really the psychology behind everything. And what we learned specifically at Crispin was that an ad can be so much more than something that is on a page in a magazine, or that interrupts something you're trying to watch, or that butts in. An ad can be an idea. An ad can be cookies that make you $10,000 that go to the south of France. Mm-hmm. And so as, you know, Mike was looking to create this brand, I believe that Liquid Death is one of the first inherently viral packaged goods. Because naturally, by the way of this, you know, as you said, this drippy skull and this black letter font, and it's called Liquid Death, and it sits on a shelf. And so when you go down a water aisle and you see all the other waters in these plastic bottles, and then you see this thing that looks like beer and it's called Liquid Death with a skull on it, the whole idea was, can we make something that stands out so much on the shelf that there's no way you can ignore it, and there's no way that you don't take out your phone and take a picture of it and share it with friends and say, what the hell is this? right? For a startup that has zero marketing budget, the product has to be the idea. And that, so from the beginning, when you talk about the success, it's inherently tied to the origin and to the idea behind Liquid Death.
Got it. Yeah. That's really interesting. And it certainly achieves that, as you mentioned, it just screams at you. It commands so much attention, this kind of brand that you built. And you said something in an interview that I heard. You said that I saw the industry from the inside and I realized we need to do it differently. When did you realize that you needed to do things differently? Was there some moment when you thought to yourself, this is the moment where I have to do things differently, or this is not going to work? Or was it something that just kind of fizzled into your life over time?
I think anyone who's worked in advertising, this is my experience coming in. Like I said, I went to ad school. You have so much exuberance. You're so full of this sort of zest to make any ad. Creativity is boundless. And then you get into it and you just realize how much, how little we have control, because, and I was just talking with a friend the other day. It's like, who isn't in the industry. I was like, man, you work on an idea, you pitch it, you're fighting against everyone inside an agency, the other people there, to have your idea rise to the top. Then you take that idea, then it has to go through a bunch of other people at the agency, through strategists, through account people. Then that idea gets presented to a client. The client has all this stuff that makes it usually worse, not better. And then, and then it goes up to a CEO, and the CEO of the company has input because he asked his wife, and his wife didn't like this one line in it. And then it goes into testing, and there's so many, there's all these things that we're always doing that get in the way of the most elegant solution, right? Over time, it gets piled and it gets kind of encrusted with all this stuff that we spend on just like a personal level. We end up spinning our wheels so much and spending so much time. And I can't tell you the number of all-nighters I've pulled the night before a presentation to get something ready for a client. And I think over time doing that, you just see, especially in our industry, there's just so much cynicism from people that have been in it for so long, and people that are kind of just beaten down by it. And at a certain point, I think after doing that for a number of years, I actually stepped out and took a year off. And before my wife and I, we said, hey, before we have kids, let's take a year off and go travel the world. So we quit our jobs and spent a year traveling through like Vietnam and Cambodia and Malaysia, and spent some time in Amsterdam, and just spent a whole year doing that, and accidentally got into freelancing through that. And so we just started to and through freelancing, suddenly you're brought into agencies, and you start to see all the dysfunction from the outside, or you realize how you're brought in to just kind of like make decks. Like you're not actually helping move the goalpost. You're not trying to help move the things forward. You're just there to make more meetings. And so I think through that I kind of realized it's like, man, we're spending our time on earth spinning, doing these things that aren't worthwhile. And we're making busy work for ourselves. And so that's been also part of it, is I think, again, Mike, having been through all that himself, we kind of see that there's all this stuff that we don't need to be doing in our jobs that are getting us away from unlocking the actual potential in ideas and the potential in our own work. And so, yeah, that's something I think with Liquid Death, we're just like, how can we build this smarter and better, and just build it the way that we want to do it? That's kind to people, that's respectful, that uses everyone's energy in a really sort of clean, directed way, and we're not overthinking. I think that's been my thing, is we make decisions very quickly and decisively, and then we go with them. And, we make small bets on ideas, and we don't, whereas in the industry, you have you're sinking, this year, $7 million to run a Super Bowl ad on the Super Bowl, which is, it's insane. is any idea really worth $7 million? I would actually throw that out there. Literally, is any idea worth $7 million? I probably don't think so, especially in a 30-second ad. And so you have all that pressure on these things that have to perform. And so for us, we want to dial all that back, find really simple ideas, do them fast and cheap, and then throw them out there and throw as many things out as we can and see what sticks. And if some of them blow up, amazing. We've done an incredible piece. We've done incredible work. If they don't, we don't worry about it.
And a couple of things have blown up. And I think now is the perfect time to kind of double click on what you guys have been doing. Yeah. I am really impressed by what you guys do. I love the stuff that you put on social media. Before I go into fan mode and tell you what my favorite ones are that you guys did, what are your, let's say, 2 or 3 favorite marketing schemes that you came up with for Liquid Death, just for our audience to get a sense of what you guys do differently?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the basic premise of everything we do is, we say we hate corporate marketing as much as you do, right? So we don't want to make marketing, we want to make entertainment. And the entertainment, sure, it like serves as marketing, but the way we sometimes think about it is like, hey, we're a entertainment brand that happens to make water or happens to make healthy beverages, right? And so when you flip that, a lot of times, I think the product that we actually make is our entertainment, right? For my job as VP of Creative, I'm like, that's what people are buying. We're creating things that make people smile, things that make people laugh. And if that's the focus on it, then we're just using the sales from our beverages to fund more cool marketing that we can do, or more cool entertainment. And when you flip that notion, it really frees you up in the kind of stuff that you can make. So, one of our biggest things we made, it was one of the first things I worked on when I came in, was about 2.5 years ago, we took, we had just signed Tony Hawk, the famous skateboarder, as a brand ambassador. And we sort of said, well, if he's a brand ambassador, we made him sign this contract. One thing we do, we have this thing called the Liquid Death Country Club. So you can join our, it's kind of a loyalty program, but to join, you have to sign a legally binding contract that gives us full ownership of your soul. And if you sign your soul away, to us, you get access to, like, early drops of merch products, exclusive merch. We have this thing that we do at music festivals, this experience. We've done some parties, but we've had, now over 235,000 people whose souls we actually legally own, which is wild. So when Tony came on, we had him sign this contract, and we're like, well, we own his soul. So I guess that also means we own his blood. So we're just going to take his blood and we're going to draw some of it and mix it in paint and mix it into skateboard graphics that we paint on these skateboards. And we sold these skateboards with Tony Hawk's blood in them for $500 a piece. And they blew out in 20 minutes and it just exploded all over the internet. We had all kind. I don't even know how many impressions we got, but it was a worldwide phenomenon, billions and billions of impressions, and spun off into all these memes and just exploded everywhere. So that was a really fun one. And everything we do, I think, is a little bit of a commentary on something in culture. I think it can't just be, it's not just wacky for wacky's sake. I think this one is really about, if you dive into it, it's about the idea of celebrity endorsements. And it's like, is every celebrity that's endorsing a product, do they really believe in it, or are they just getting paid? Right. Mm-hmm. And so under the surface, this is a kind of commentary on, it's like, no, Tony Hawk, we took his blood. That's how much he believes in Liquid Death, is that we stole his blood and then we turned around and sold it to people. Right. Another fun one that I really like is, we did, when we were launching our flavored sparkling water, we did a blind taste test. And I love this one because, this is the first time we were launching in like a real new product category for us. And so we said, hey, we should probably really put some energy behind this. Maybe we'll hire an advertising agency to help us. Because we do most of our work in-house, but maybe we'll hire an advertising agency to help out on this one. And so we sat down to write a brief for it. And in the first 15 minutes of just kind of talking about what, some things we might want to explore, we just had this idea that was making us laugh. And we kind of all looked at each other and we're like, should we just do this? And we all just looked at it. We were like, yeah, okay. And so for like our biggest launch in company history, we just decided in 15 minutes on an idea that made us laugh, and we saved ourselves thousands and thousands of dollars and months of time developing a whole idea, right? So the idea was, we were launching flavors, so that it's about taste. It was the first time we ever had to talk about taste, because we were selling water until that point. And so we were like, well, how would a real brand talk about taste? And they would do some kind of taste test, and they would talk about how important, this tastes better than this. And so we're like, well, how can we just make sure that we win a taste test? And we're like, what if we just put it against super gross things? You just had to taste the new Liquid Death flavored sparkling against something that's really gross, but we'll make the things that are really gross also very expensive. So not just is it better than these gross things, it's actually better than things that, it's better than things that cost hundreds and hundreds of dollars, right? So we brought 17 real people into a warehouse, into a studio, and we sat them down blindfolded and had them, first try a can of Liquid Death, lime or mango or whatever. And then they tried a sip of like squid ink, or we blended up like Wagyu beef cheeseburgers and they sipped on that, or like wasabi water, or $800 beluga caviar or something. And so we made this. So at the end it was like, so which do you prefer? And people have like vomited. People are cursing us out. And obviously we came out the winner, this, $2 can of water versus, caviar that cost $800. So we were kind of a clear winner. Mm-hmm. But again, that was like this real deconstruction of this traditional advertising technique that we broke down and parodied and satired for our own purposes.
Ja, absolutely. Jetzt kommt die kürzeste Podcast-Werbung der Welt. Du hast offensichtlich Lust auf Geschäftsideen. Ohne gute Geschäftsidee kannst du nichts gründen. Mit der falschen Geschäftsidee verschwendest du deine Zeit. Finde eine richtig gute Geschäftsidee, die zu dir passt. Geh auf digitaleoptimisten.de/newsletter und abonniere den Newsletter, den über 11.000 Gründerinnen und Gründer lesen. Werbung vorbei, weiter geht's. I remember I saw on Instagram there was I think someone posted a negative comment on, I think it was, I'm not sure it was the iced tea or the flavored water. I think the person wrote that it tastes worse than a large person's back sweat. So what you guys did is you didn't just comment on it or delete the comment, but you actually brought in a very, very large person and you made a taste test. And actually, I'm not sure. I think you won that test as well.
We did. Yeah. We got one of the guys from Jackass, from the new version of Jackass. And we were like, let's take this comment super seriously. The comment was, I'd rather lick sweat off a fat guy's back. So we brought him in, and we had people test, we put him inside of this, like, we had him running inside this like personal sauna. So he's extra sweaty. And then we sat him up on a table next to a can of Liquid Death. And then again, brought people blindfolded in and tasted the Liquid Death or licked his back. And yeah, I think that's part of the fun, is this like taking these really dumb ideas very seriously, right? It's the same math as the cookie thing in a way. It's like, let's start from a really idiotic, dumb starting place. But then from there, we treat it very, very seriously, and we treat it like a real marketer would. And I think there's a real fun in that sort of satire and that idea of parodying these things and mixing kind of the highbrow and lowbrow. That to me is the stuff that makes me most excited, is dumb and smart all mixed together. And there's a real interesting tension between those two when they exist together.
There's some magic in that Venn diagram when those two come together. I agree. And one other thing that you have to tell me about and our listeners is that one thing that I also loved is a snowboard that has a very special name. What's up with the snowboard?
So just a couple of months ago, we worked with Burton, which is a big snowboarding company here in the US. And we created a snowboard called the Death Trap, which is a coffin-shaped snowboard that was basically unrideable because it has no camber. So essentially you have like a very flat board that's shaped then like a elongated coffin. And we really sold these through our site. And honestly, this is one that we were kind of like, sometimes, again, when we launch stuff, it's like, maybe this will blow up. Maybe no one will care. I think over time we're getting smarter and smarter every time when we put more stuff out. But this one was one that I was surprised by. I mean, we blew out again, pretty much instantly. Within a couple minutes, we sold through our entire stock of these snowboards that you literally can't ride. So again, in the world of like a dumb idea, but brought to life and treated seriously. I mean, it doesn't kind of get more insane than that people are shelling out $300 for an unrideable snowboard.
Totally crazy. And I loved the way that you marketed it. Yeah. The videos that you produce. I think you took some pros, some snowboarding pros, put them, gave them the Death Trap, the snowboard that no one can ride. And it was just clips of them just falling into the sand, trying to do clips. And that was hilarious. I thought that was a fantastic idea. Yeah. Fantastic. So, obviously these are really creative things. I think you absolutely achieve your goal in standing out and being super loud and unavoidable on social media, but also, being shareable and creating these shareable memes and moments. It feels almost like, I'm not sure if you're going to like this, but it's almost like a mixture of PR stunts, April Fool's jokes, but also inside jokes. It's like, what if Mr. Beast launched a water brand? I'm not sure if it's a really unique take to what you guys do. And I want to kind of double click on your creative process, because you also mentioned a couple of things. Start from an idiotic place, but take it super seriously. And I know that you do a bunch of stuff differently when it comes to your brand. I think from the onset, you don't think of your brand as a brand, but more of like a character. Could you elaborate on that a little bit? Because I found that concept just very interesting, to kind of unravel how you think about the brand.
Yeah, totally. And I think one of the fun things about building this brand is we're doing it live. We're doing it in front of everyone. We're not, it's not like we're starting from this theoretical place and it's like, okay, well now we have this brand and it means it's this, and these are our brand values. And so that means we're going to make this ad and then we're going to make this campaign and do this. Instead, we're kind of, and then a lot of times what, like I alluded to before, is there's a lot of pre-testing oftentimes that goes into marketing, where you bring some storyboards to a bunch of people in a focus group room and you get their opinions first. And of course they're not going to fully get it and it's going to be presented poorly. And that process naturally makes good ideas die. And instead what we're doing is like I said, we're just putting stuff out there as quickly, as cheaply as we can, having as much fun as we can, doing that all simultaneously. And then we learn from the reaction from it as it goes out. And so I'm personally learning as we're going. And I kind of, maybe like a year ago or so, I was just thinking about this and I was like, man, we're Liquid Death. We kind of have some characters that we actually write as. So I'm a writer by trade, a copywriter. And we kind of have these different voices that sometimes we'll slide into. Of like, we have this like evil corporation voice that it's bent on global domination, and it's the satire of, it's basically like what actual corporations are trying to do, but if we actually just said it out loud, and it's a really fun voice to write in. And I was like, right, we're playing this character of something. And the more I thought about it, I was like, that's what we're doing. Liquid Death is not this brand that has these rigid brand rules and we're trying to follow, color inside these certain lines. We're a character, and the best part about a character is a character is free to move into a lot of places. If you think about your favorite TV shows, whatever you watch, the ones that are character driven, we're fascinated by the character behind it, because the character is a complex human being that can, go into dark places, but also has levity to them. And the best part about a character that you love is when they actually surprise you, right? You have a character that you think you understand, and then on a show, suddenly they'll do one thing, they'll do the opposite of what the audience may be expecting. And it totally makes sense for the character, but it's surprising to us as the audience. And so I think Liquid Death is this really nuanced, complex character that we're building, that we give free rein to move into all these places. And so in the same way that you would be writing on a television program, I think we kind of realized that we can write ideas for this character. So what I mean by that is if you were in a writer's room on a TV show and you had a character and the idea was like, oh, the main character's car gets towed in this episode. And it's like, okay, well, how would this character react to having, their car gets towed, and means they have a breakdown. And, as a writer, you would most likely have a really immediate reaction, like, oh, the character would do this. And so now I can really easily write that, right? And so for us, what it means is when we're coming up with ideas, it's like, well, what would the character of Liquid Death do in that situation? If we're doing a partnership with somebody, or we want to promote, launch a new product or whatever, it's like, well, how would the character of Liquid Death approach that thing? And there's usually kind of like a single right answer. And so that's the cool thing, is as we're looking at stuff, we're like, oh, that's what Liquid Death would do. And so it makes it very easy to be decisive, because we all understand this character we're writing for. And so in opposition to the way that like advertising, when you're concepting stuff as a creative, a lot of times you're going, what could we do? And you have this big, like, open-ended, and you're like, well, we could do this and we could do this. And you kind of are in this, like, I talk about this like creative wilderness where you're just kind of groping around for ideas. But as Liquid Death, I've gotten to the point where we're like, well, what would Liquid Death do, rather than what could we do? Mm-hmm. And there, like I said, you land on an answer, and so all of us can point to, we're like, yeah, that's what we would do. And then we just go off and do it. And so it makes our lives way easier, because we inherently understand this character that we're building rather than a brand. And I think it's also how we like live on social media, right? Brands need to have the ability to be this more interesting, malleable thing that can react with people, and people can play along with it. And we are very playful with our fans, and we do stuff to interact with them. So it feels like there's a real back and forth with them. We're a real entity, rather than just this like esoteric idea of a brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And characters have range. You mentioned that, right? So if I think about Michael Scott from The Office, obviously he's this huge tool, this weirdo, but he has these moments of sentimentality, right? Where he connects with people. And Walter White, or I don't know, whatever you want to, Sopranos or they have range. And I heard a story where you had a task of doing something really serious, of writing I'm not sure if it was an obituary. I'm not sure if that's the right term, but a big fan passed away, and you had to do something in the tone of the brand that is so over the top and so sarcastic. So, I mean, how is that even possible? Yeah.
So it was my, it was like, I'd just been on board for a month and a half, and there was a fan who had passed away. Her name was Gabby. She passed away from ovarian cancer. And I I still get chills, like literally right now, just kind of thinking about this. But she'd passed away, and her brother came back to us and was like, hey, it's the year anniversary of Gabby's passing, and we're doing a fundraiser. Would you guys be willing to make a post to try to raise money? And so I'm brand new, and I'm trying to sort out what Liquid Death even is. I'm trying to wrap my brain around it. And I had to write a heartfelt but funny post about a fan who had died, and it was like to thread that needle and to make it make sense for everybody, and to be respectful, not just respectful, but to be joyful about celebrating someone's life. We wrote something, we posted it, and I remember it was on a Saturday, and I was just in my backyard, and I happened to open my phone and see that it had gone up, and it was just a flood of people reacting to it and commenting and posting and sharing their own experiences. And I just started bawling. This brand that, as you said, feels silly and over the top and satirical and ridiculous, but then can flex and has a real human side to it as well. And you saw people having this real human reaction to it. It was just really beautiful. And it goes back to this idea that I think there's this real human and heart side behind everything we do. There's a real, as I said, joy and exuberance. It should feel like there's people behind it making this thing, and it's not this faceless corporation. We're real people putting ideas out in the world, and we have real emotions, and the brand can express that as well. And it's something I want to be a part of. It's a brand that, and a brand in a community, and things that I want to put out in the world. And as I said, it's like, sometimes it's bigger than, it sounds silly, but it's like, it's bigger than selling canned water. It's totally, really, putting humor and joy out in the world is something that everybody needs. And that kind of, that experience really was edifying to me.
Yeah, I guess so. That's really, that is really some incredible depth to, I mean, it speaks to you as a copywriter. I would have no idea of going about that. But maybe when you think about Liquid Death as a character, if I think about, my favorite movie, TV series or Netflix shows, at some point, sometimes characters get a little bit stale, or sometimes characters, they kind of become almost caricatures of themselves, or they fizzle out in a way. So is there some downside that you also see to the whole thing? It also gets people riled up, it gets them involved, but is there also, the threat of maybe kind of becoming a caricature of yourself, like so many sitcoms do at some point? Like The Simpsons, Homer Simpson became even dumber and dumber and dumber all the time until I stopped watching it. Yeah, but Homer Simpson
was on the air Homer Simpson is still on there. It's the longest,
true.
It's the longest running television show, I believe, in the world, or at least in the US, right? So, you think of where that started in the early 90s and where it is today, it's wild to see that thing still lasts, because it does have this interesting, it's starting from a place that no one else is doing. And yeah, it's a good question. I think the way that we look at it is, there's a late night sort of variety comedy show here in the US called Saturday Night Live that probably some people would know. It's a weekly program where they're ingesting anything that's gone on that week and making skits or making fake commercials or comedic monologues about it. And I think we really see ourselves as that sort of thing, where really all we're doing is we're ingesting culture and things that are out in the world that we all, that are all cultural touchstones. And then we're kind of bringing it inside, and then we spew it out again with our weird Liquid Death bent on it. So as long as culture exists, there's a million things that we can pull in. And I think one of the really, part of the amazing formula of that show is that they bring in celebrities every week, right? So it's like, it might be a comedian, it might be a famous actress, it might be a American football player who actually has no business being on stage in a comedy program. And so but they bring in all these different people, and then they find where the comedy lies in having each one of those people there. And so, we've done stuff where we've pulled in, like I said, the world's most famous skateboarder, but we've also pulled in stand-up comedians. We also pulled in Martha Stewart, who is like a homemaking icon, who is a 70-something-year-old woman who makes beautiful pies and turkeys and stuff. Mm-hmm. We pulled her in and did something insane with her. So as long as we can pull in new people and reference new things, we have endless ideas, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's a great point. I think you kind of touched on it before, but let's just kind of double click on the idea of a writer's room, because I just imagine it to be a room where you just pitch yourselves ideas and try to bounce off stuff that gets you going or gets a laugh out of you. Maybe, like sometimes Conan O'Brien talks about his time copywriting for The Simpsons back in the day. And this is kind of how I imagine you guys working, but I'm not sure if that's the case. But I found that an interesting idea of, having a writer's room. It makes sense if you think about it as a character to also have a writer's room where you would also bring in some comedic talent to get some new ideas. Maybe you could elaborate on that a little bit.
Yeah. So, we kind of concept the same way in some respects, but I think, again, rather than having this like elaborate, like you would at an agency or an internal marketing department, we don't have like these elaborate briefs with strategists and, all the stuff. We're just like, hey, we could do something with, X comedian. What would we do? And from there, that's just a great starting block for us to, as a group, just meet and we just kind of kick ideas around and try to outdo the other person with dumb. Literally yesterday, there's something we decided on. There were two projects we were presenting up yesterday that we landed on that I'm so like the ideas that went out were literally where one of us goes, what's the dumbest idea we could do? And then you go, well, we would do this. And then, you just say something and you're trying to make the other people laugh. And we get to that real dumb idea. But again, there's joy in that stupidity. There's a real, because no one else is going that far down there. No one else is going into that dumb space. And so it's that, I think there's just something wonderful about playing these murky waters where it's so dumb. No one would ever think to do that. Right. And so that's what we're just trying to do, is try to make ourselves laugh. We take those ideas and then we have another group where we meet with a lot of the other kind of heads of marketing, and we just it's real casual, and we just kind of kick ideas around, and then we all collectively go like, yeah, that's funny, or we add to it or we change it. And it's a really informal process. It's not the way that you put presentation decks together and you have, 40 ideas that you're trying to pitch someone. It's a real just kind of, us just talking and trying to make each other laugh. And then once we land on something, we don't have to write scripts. We get to stuff where this is probably bad. We've gotten to stuff where we're shooting a video and we like kind of have a script, but it's about the idea, because we know if we have that right idea, we'll let the alchemy of it coming together on set, we'll find those funny moments. And so it's much more casual and loose a lot of times in that way, than it would be in a much more formalized environment.
Love it. That makes a ton of sense. And of course, Andy, I briefed you beforehand that this podcast is about smart business ideas and how to make them successful. I think we talked a ton about creativity and rethinking the way that you can find your voice as a brand and breaking through in the first place, because it's super hard just to position a fountain water brand in the market. But of course, we have to talk about business ideas. And I believe you might have brought one or two, and I also brought one or two. So why don't you, as a guest, kick us off? What's a business idea that you would love to launch if you had all the time in the world and would need a new challenge?
I have a very meta take on this, which is very funny. I think in advertising, there are so many great ideas that don't see the light of day, or we spend all this time generating ideas for other people that we don't have time for ourselves. And I think one of the there's a lot of lessons to what we're doing with Liquid Death, but one was like, hey, Mike had this idea and then he dedicated to it because he believed in it and he chased it down and kept it going. So one thing that I've always thought was to create basically an incubator, but specifically designed around advertising people and marketing people who don't have time to develop their ideas. Right. Because we're always generating these things, and as a creative, you're just giving ideas away and you're not able to actually take them and build them to fruition or understand the business implications or all that side of things. So to actually generate some sort of incubator specifically designed for this industry that helps creatives take their idea from sort of a something on the paper to actually, trying to make it real. I think that would be really successful. The irony is that I have not had time to do this. So I need my own service in order to make my service work.
Okay, now it becomes really meta. Yeah,
I know. Yeah. So that's one idea.
I think the interesting.
Someone please steal that so that I can make it for myself now.
Yeah, that's what we say here. Steal these business ideas on this podcast. But what I like about the idea is, usually in the startup world, it's also kind of formulaic. Not sure if that's a word, but it follows a formula in a way. And you usually try to take a business person and mix that with a tech-minded person to build something. And what you're proposing is, let's mix, if I understand correctly, a business person with a creative person, and let's get those ideas out and add kind of the business side and maybe the doing side of the ideas, just to get
creatives need producers. Creatives need people that can actualize the ideas that are in our head, right? And that's the hard part for a lot of us. So yeah, I think that would be great. The other thing, and this is not like a big explosive idea, but in my outside life, I'm also an ultra marathoner. So I do, which means I run races of, 50 miles, 100 miles. I've done a 500-kilometer race across the state of Tennessee before. So that's my other gig, is running insane amounts. And so that's another space I'm really interested in. And so if I really were to launch like a passion project, it would definitely be in that space. And I think one thing that's missing, that there is ability to do this, is personalized nutrition gels, right? So there are every body sweats at different rates, requires different levels of caloric intake. Even during the course of whether it's a marathon or 100-miler race or something like that, you need different things throughout the course of that race. So to create a sort of a premium service where we can design nutrition for specific runners or triathletes or cyclists that are based on their unique needs, and then also can be used in races to enhance with different additives throughout the race to help them perform at kind of optimized performance levels. So that's my other non-funny idea.
No, but that's actually really interesting, because if you think about it, I mean, how some products came about. Some of them, they started in something very high-techy. It could also be like the NASA program, and I don't know, whatever they invented. And it kind of trickles down to the masses. And if you are an 500-kilometer race, that's absolutely insane. I don't know how you do that. But if you think about it that way, it's kind of a product that you can it has this marketing angle to it, right? This for super, obviously, very high functioning people. And so that can't be bad for me if it's good for someone who runs an ultra marathon. So I like that idea of these gels. I have to pitch an idea to you too, Andy.
Please.
And I'll tell you afterwards how the Digital Optimisten community rates this idea. But I thought, I'm not sure if you can hate it or love it, but I've been looking forward to this pitch all day. My idea is called Nerdcore. And it's an energy drink, but it's for nerds. And it also has a marketing angle. And I also want to go over the top. So what I want to do with the marketing playbook is you treat the most boring sports like chess, spelling bees. There's the Excel World Championship. There's all these kinds of things that, are just super boring stuff for brainsy people. And you treat them like esports tournaments. You have a gang of people, they dress up in their over-the-top costumes. You sponsor the guys, the best spelling bee person in the world or the Excel World Championship person. You go all in on building this elite squad in these sports that no one cares about, these ballsy, the brainy sports that have no sponsors and have no one cares about them. But you really change the game. You might even bring fans. I don't know, maybe even hooligans, You make it a 5-star experience of really elevating this. You sponsor the shit out of these kind of events. And you kind of position a brand that you say, well, this drink unlocks 100% of people's brains because you got these, this roster of people who just do crazy, or maybe, this, what's it called? The Rubik's Cube, Zauberwürfel in German, all that. There's so many of these events, that just are mind-boggling how people do the Tetris World Championship. There's so much stuff you can do that people just kind of feel a bit geeky, a bit nerdy, a bit nichey. And you just go into the energy drink space and you kind of do a marketing play on that. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. I needed to pitch this idea to you already.
Okay. I think the name could use work. I'm not sure about Nerdcore. Okay. But I love the idea because, right, you're taking again, like that idea of sponsored athletes and people, operating at the highest performance levels, like the Gatorades or whatever sports drinks there are in the world. But then you're bringing attention to these kind of antithetical spaces. But again, there's this real, to me, what I like about that idea is there's both a tenderness to it and some satire involved, right? There's sort of like, we really care about these spaces, but also we're going to have fun with it. And we're going to kind of make a parody of like how sports sponsorships actually work, right? So to me, there's that real nice tension inherently built into that idea, which I love. Which I love that idea of smart and dumb kind of all mixed together.
Exactly, that's what I was going for. And the idea that I had in my head, what would happen if you would bring a 2024 Kansas City Chiefs team into like the 1960s NFL? They would just crush it. So the same thing would happen to you. Would just bring all this crazy level of talent and pampering the talent, the players, and you would just bring this into this super amateurish league, and you would just kind of dominate it and change the game. I don't know. I wanted to pitch that idea.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, at least here in the US, there's drinks for esports. There's brands like G Fuel and stuff that have identified esports as a big space. So they make, performance drinks for video games, which I'm not in that space, but that seems, it's taken very seriously from what I can tell, which is hilarious to me. But yeah, so I think there's definitely room for that. Yeah. All
right. Perfect. Andy, is there, just kind of wrapping up our conversation. I love this conversation. Is there anything that I didn't ask you, but you thought you wanted to give to the German audience, or that I should have asked you about and I just missed in my preparation?
No, I just think that we can all use more laughter, more fun, more like carefreeness in everything we're doing. And so I think there's inherently this idea behind Liquid Death that is both it's about this idea that if we step back from things, we free ourselves from being in it, right? So I think, and we've never talked about this is not like an organizational thing at all, but I really think that the basic thesis behind Liquid Death is that there's a better way to do everything, but no one's really bothered to think of it yet, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you go back and you look at bottling water in aluminum cans, when we were originally looking to do that, as the company was being formed, it was basically impossible to do. They could not find anyone that could can water at the source, because it literally did not exist anywhere, right? To be considered spring water, it has to be essentially bottled or canned directly there. And there was no one in the world that was doing that. And so it actually was a problem when they were originally trying to launch the brand. They were like, we can't make this brand because this thing that we want to do literally doesn't exist, which is often probably a great place to start from, right? When you find that this thing is impossible, it actually means you're on the right track. And so they stuck with it and eventually found a canner that could do that. And when we were first starting off, we heard this all the time. It was like, no one's going to drink water out of a can. We would get on calls and people would tell us to our face, no one is going to drink water out of a can. And it's because over years and years, there's been this marketing strategy behind bottled water, which is, it's all about purity. It's about the mountain source, or it's glacier fed. And so the whole idea was that the only way that people would know how pure it was is if you see it inside the bottle, inside that plastic bottle or that glass bottle. And so we came along and we're like, what if we just didn't do that? And it's this marketing strategy that no one had bothered to actually question, or maybe somebody had, but they just were like, well, no one's ever going to drink water out of a can. And then you think about it for a second and you say, well, hold on, we drink soda out of cans, we drink energy drinks out of cans, beer out of cans, all these things that have way more ingredients and all kinds of crazy chemicals in them that we don't even think about. So the fact that no one had bothered to think about that strategy and question that, think of the millions of tons of plastic waste that has been generated by the entire industry because no one had stopped to question, like, what if we just didn't put it in a plastic bottle? And so I think from the very inception of Liquid Death, it's been this idea of like, what if we just stopped for a moment, stepped back and considered a better way to do it? And so I think, that's really the lesson that I always tell people is looking at this brand that, might be heavy metal and has skulls and feels like for a lot of people is like, well, I don't listen to metal, I'm not going to drink Liquid Death. But there's this real core to the idea is like, there's always literally a better way to do every single thing. We don't ever have to accept anything just because it's the easy way to do it, or it's the way it's been done. And so I think that's the thing that I love most about what we're doing is at any given point in the process, we're always looking at it and we're like, okay, but how should we do this? Not how do people do this? How should it actually be done? And so from an organizational standpoint, from a marketing standpoint, from everything we're doing, if you stop overthinking it, it actually allows you to sit back and take a real kind of beginner's mindset, if you will, right? We always talk about like beginner's mindset. If you take that and you can maintain your naivety throughout the entire course of this brand, that's where we unlock the real magic and actually generates, a brand that is now worth, hundreds of millions of dollars worldwide.
I read 700 million,
just a few short years, right? It's because we're not bothering to sit back and kind of be blank and take on everything in front of us with like a blank mindset. I think that's where you find those white spaces, right?
Fantastic. I think that's the best way to end the show. So Andy, thank you so much for being so open and kind and sharing also your business ideas. And I think your hacks of strategies of being creative and how you do things differently. So thank you and talk soon.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me.
So, hier ist nochmal Alex. Das war meine Folge mit Andy. Und ja, ich fand das super cool. Ich habe wahnsinnig viel gelernt über, wie man Marketing wirklich völlig neu denken kann, wie man alte Sachen vergessen kann, wie zum Beispiel Brandbooks, die eigentlich niemand mehr braucht, lange Prozesse, die am Ende Kreativität ersticken. Und ich habe 4 Sachen gelernt, wie man Marken neu denken kann und das Marketing und das kreative Potenzial von Marken viel besser rausarbeiten kann. Das erste ist, definiere einen Charakter. Viele Marken, glaube ich, sehen sich eher als zu technisch, zu starr gedacht. Andy sieht Liquid Death eher als ein Charakter, der Range hat, der Ecken und Kanten hat, der genauso over the top sein kann, der genauso eine Stimme sein kann, aber der auch ernst sein kann mit einem gewissen Witz. Und das fand ich ganz stark. Zweitens, der zweite Punkt, den ich interessant fand, ist, wie er betont, dass er so schnell wie möglich sein will. All das, die Bürokratie, all diese Hierarchieebenen, die Ideen kleiner werden lässt, den kleinsten gemeinsamen Nenner finden lässt, das will er nicht, sondern es geht darum, um Schnelligkeit, Lernen von den Reaktionen, einfach weitermachen und Schnelligkeit als Wert zu definieren. Das dritte, was ich toll fand, ist dieser Gedanke vom Writers Room. Das passt ja zu dem Gedanken, dass eine Marke ein Charakter aus einer TV- oder einer Netflix-Show ist. Auch da gibt es einen Writers Room, einen Autorenraum, wo man Ideen hin und her wirft. Was kann als nächstes passieren? Was würde passieren? Und sich dann überlegt, wie agieren dann die Protagonisten auf eine neue Situation? Und dass er da auch Talent von außen reinbringt. Er hat von ein paar US-Promis gesprochen, aber auch von Comedians, die in den USA riesig sind. Da überlegt er, wie kann ich Teil des Mainstreams, Teil des Zeitgeistes sein und die neu reinbringen. Und das Letzte, was ich gelernt habe, was ich total spannend finde und was ich ehrlich gesagt überlege, sollte man das mal für digitale Optimisten machen, ist an einem idiotischen Startpunkt anfangen, ist dann aber super ernst nehmen. Wir haben ein paar Beispiele diskutiert vom Death Trap, von dem Snowboard, was keiner fahren kann. Ich finde, es ist genau mein Humor. Ich finde es super lustig. Ich kann da wirklich echt drüber lachen, was die machen. Und es bleibt halt immer neu und überrascht einen immer wieder. Gleichzeitig bleibt es irgendwie bei seinem Ton. Also das fand ich total cool und das sind meine 4 Sachen, die ich gelernt habe. Und ich habe gerade noch mit Andy gesprochen, als wir die Aufnahme schon beendet haben. Wir haben ausgemacht, dass Andy Liquid Death Pakete an unsere Hörer und vor allem die Leser unseres Newsletters schickt. Also der nächste Newsletter kommt am Dienstag raus, denn falls ihr das hier am Montag hört, also morgen, falls ihr es am Erscheinungstag hört, und deshalb abonniert den Newsletter und da werde ich die Details benennen, wie du dir eine Box von Liquid Death sichern kannst. Also, das war's von mir. Ich hoffe, dir hat die Folge genauso viel Spaß gemacht wie mir und wir hören uns nächste Woche Montag.